So we do want to come now into the scripture and look at what we are going to call what we do is important here at the church. Now, we need to try and head this off just a little bit because I have heard this challenge from pastors in the past, and it's an interesting little challenge. And the challenge is this: if you were accused of being a believer, is there enough evidence in your life to convict you in a court of law? Have you ever heard that little analogy before, that little story before? Okay? I always kind of like that because it kind of challenged me. However, I would think the likes of Martin Luther were turned over in his grave, if you heard that. And the reason I say that is Martin Luther, who is connected to the Reformation, okay, we're talking hundreds of years ago now, but Martin Luther came out of a church tradition that was very much about what you do. So he rebelled against that, and he became so much focused on God's grace, God's forgiveness, that he would shy away. He would even, like I said, rebel. He would push away from anything that would seem to indicate that we are, quote unquote, required to do anything as believers. Okay? So I want you to be very careful as we listen, as you hear me this morning. We have to be careful. Let's not confuse the gospel of grace. Because salvation, forgiveness of sin, is totally God's work that He does in my life. I do nothing to earn God's forgiveness. There's no good amount of works that I could do that would be good enough to satisfy God. Totally what Jesus did on the cross for me. Okay, that is one of the things we talked about last week. That is one of the core beliefs of who we are as a church. However, let me also say this. That we're going to, this morning for the next 25, 30 minutes, we're going to look at two things that we're going to see. And the phrase that is introducing these two particular things is that you will know them by their blank. I'm going to fill in that blank with two different words. One of them is going to be kind of a negative thing, as is given in the scriptures. The other one is going to be quite a positive thing. Now we're going to kind of work through this relatively quickly. Hopefully, if you have any of the papers, I did print off just a few. I thought we'll have more people here, thankfully, than I thought we may have this morning. But the words are up here on the screen if you want to follow along. There may be even a spare little paper there in the back if you would like to grab one of those. First I want to look at is the book of Matthew, chapter 7. The book of Matthew, the first of the Gospels in the New Testament, Matthew chapter 7. And you're going to see, hopefully, what I mean when I say this is put in a bit of a negative kind of light. And you'll see what I'm saying here as we get into this. Okay? Matthew chapter 7. I'm going to start reading in verse 15. Reading for a few verses, and then we're just going to sort of highlight some of the bits as we come through the scripture. First, going to read just verses 15 through 20, first of all, and we're just going to touch on two or three things in this. The Bible says, "Beware of false prophets, who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves." What phrase do we have in the English language that sounds like that? A what? In what?
Wolf in sheep's clothing.
Anyway, wolf in sheep's clothing. As a matter of fact, we're going to look at this because we're thinking about that of works. So when it says that you will know them by their works, by what they do there in Matthew, and we're going to see right straight away in verse 15, a wolf in sheep's clothing. He says, "Beware false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their," what? What does it say? By their fruits, by their works. by what they do. Now, I found that interesting because it says, beware of false prophets. What is a prophet? A prophet would be someone who would come along and who would do what? What would they do? What would their job be? They would speak. They would preach. They would warn people. And in this context, that they would be those who would come along with teaching and so forth and so on. And so what they would use is their mouths. Now, if I was writing the Bible, I would say this. You will know them, that is the false prophets, that is the wolf in what kind of clothing? Sheep's clothing. You will know them not by their fruits, not by what they do, but by what they say. That's what makes sense to me. So when I saw this, now I've read this a million times, but when I saw this in this kind of a new light, I thought, well, that's interesting. Why would it say you'll know them by their fruits? Let's carry on. Do men gather grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Do they? Of course not. Even so, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. Makes sense? Absolutely. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a bad tree bear good fruit. Makes sense as well. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down, thrown into the fire. Therefore, we get the same phrase again, by their fruits, by what they do, you will know them. Wow. This thing of the wolf in sheep's clothing, the false prophet. By the way, if you were to go back in the Old Testament, do you know what the penalty is for a false prophet? It's pretty severe. You know what it is? It's the death penalty by stoning. Okay? That's pretty severe. So if you're a prophet, you better make sure that you got all your ducks in a row. Okay? So this is quite a serious thing. When we see this, we see that you can recognize them, as we said, not by what they do, not by what they say, but the things that they do. Why is that? And I scratched my head and I thought to myself, what is the point here? What's the emphasis? And I think what the emphasis is this, is that words are easy. Isn't it easy to say words? Okay? We can fool people by what we say. You can walk up to someone and say the words, I love you, but in your heart be full of hate. We can fool people by the words. And I think as Jesus was speaking, he was saying essentially that what really counts is not necessarily the words you say, although our words do need to follow our actions. Every parent knows that we should not say to our children, listen, do what I say, don't do what I do. Don't work that way, does it? They will do what we do. Words can be faith, but actions require work, actions require patience, actions require all those things in who we really are. And the reality is, as time goes on, our actions will really come out in who we are on the inside. And I think that's what Jesus is speaking. So here are some things. Now, like I said, this is a bit of a negative sort of thing, but you'll know them by their works. That is the false prophets. So it's a challenge to us. A challenge to us. But then let's continue on, verse 21, reading down through just a few verses. Verse 21. It says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven. But he who does, now by the way, you have to be careful about this, he who does the will of my Father in heaven. Many will say to me in that day, in the day of judgment, later on, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name? Have we not cast out demons in your name and done many wonders in your name? But then verse 23 says, I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. And we're going to call this the problem of the poser. Poser. Poser is a relatively kind of a new word that's come around, I don't know, a few years ago. What's a poser? You know what a poser is? Okay? What's a poser? What?
Rosie.
Rosie. Okay, this is a poser. Poser is someone who wants to look a certain way, but they're not really that way. They want to appear a certain way. And when Jesus is saying, listen, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord. Some will look at all the things that I've done. Look at all the things that I've done and the things that I've said. Da, 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 da. Jesus says, listen, that's not where it's at. He said, he's going to tell them in those days. He said, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who work lawlessness. So once again, we see that of works in a negative light. But the reality is, it shows who they are on the inside. So the inside comes out in what they do. Last, starting in verse 24. Therefore, whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them, I will liken him to a wise man who built his house on the rock. And if you're familiar with the little song that says that the wise man built his house on the rock. The wise man built his house on the rock. And then what happened? And the rains came down. And the what? Floods came up. And the rains came down and the floods came up. And the rains came down and the floods came up. But the house on the rock stood what? Safe. Stood firm. However, we all know that the foolish man, in verse 26, built his house on the sand, verse 27. And the rain ascended, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, and it fell flat. And he said, and then so it was that Jesus had ended these things, that the people were astonished as he taught them, having one of authority, not as the scribes. The point of it, Jesus was asking and challenging, said, are you hearing or are you listening? Are you hearing or are you listening? So the point is this of works, this of that you will know them by what they do. So he talked about those who are a wolf in sheep's clothing. He spoke about the poser, those who would say they did all these kind of things, but there was nothing on the inside of them to bring out the truth of who they were. So we're going to take that and just kind of put that off on the side. We're going to spend the next 15 or 20 minutes look at something that I think is incredibly important as we try and bring this together about who we are and what we want to do. And this is now the John passage. So over in John chapter 13, if you'll flip over to there for me, please. And we want to take a look at that of love. That of love. Okay, John chapter 13. John 13. And I want to ask us who are here and all those who are watching, and Lord willing, all of our folks will be looking at this on our YouTube channel at some point throughout either today or the days to come. And the challenge is this. As we sang that song, love each other, one another. If I were to take a spiritual x-ray machine and put it up against yourself, what level of love for others who gather here on a Sunday morning could you say that you have for other people? See, this is where we go from being a group of gathered believers that we make a transition to being a real, live, breathing, functioning, dynamic church. It's a difference. It's a difference. Okay? Those who gathered down at It's not, what's the stadium? It's Eco Power Stadium now, isn't it? It's not Keep Mode anymore, it's Eco Power, okay? It's Eco Power Stadium where the Rovers gather and play. And on any given match day, there'll be thousands of people who gather there to do what? To sit, stand up, cheer when that little ball goes into the net, right? At least on the Rover side. They may get frustrated when it goes into the other side. They gather together on that day to do what? To cheer and watch the team hopefully win. And then the game finishes, the referee blows his whistle, and everyone toddles off and goes home. Okay? Is there anything wrong with that? Of course not. Of course not. Is that a model of a church? No. So my question is, as we gather on a Sunday morning to watch the game and sing the songs, and the Rovers, the fans got their own kind of songs, don't they? Yeah. So they got their songs. Are we more than just a gathering group of people to watch an activity? Or are we more than that? Do we love one another in the way that we're going to be looking at here in the scripture? John chapter 13. Let's read it again. We're actually going to continue on a couple more verses. John 13, let's starting again at verse 33. It says, little children. Interesting title, isn't it? Little children. Was he speaking to chronologically young children? No. He was speaking to them as his children in faith, as those who are young, as those who he has this intimate connection with. He says, my little children, I want to speak to you. I shall speak to you a little while longer. Now wait a minute. How long have they been with him? Altogether, how long, roughly? Do you know how long, roughly? Was it 10 years? Was it 1 year?
3.
About 3 years. From the time that Jesus started his ministry up until his crucifixion was about 3 years, give or take. But they've been with him pretty much 24/7. Now, can you imagine how these words must hit them when he says, I shall be with you a little while longer? What do you think must have been going through their minds? What do you think must have been going through their hearts? What question would you ask? Where are you going? I mean, we've got a good gig going on here. We like this. Why, we watch these miracles that you do. We watch you feeding all these people. We like listening to you. We like being with you. You're kind of like our dad. You're kind of like someone that just kind of brings people together. And wow, this is amazing. But Jesus says, I'm going to be with you just a little while longer. He is preparing them for his departure. He's preparing them for his departure. Let's read on. And you will seek me. And as I said to the Jews, where I am going, you cannot come. So now I say to you, my little children. And then he comes in with this thing, a new commandment I give to you. Now, I just wanted to throw that out. We're going to skip down to verse 36 to a bit where you're quite familiar with. And let's put that in connection with what Jesus had just got done saying. Simon Peter, who's the big mouth of the group, by the way. He's the big mouth. Simon Peter, anyone who says this, you would expect Simon Peter to say it. Simon Peter says, Lord, where are you going? Exactly what Audrey said. Lord, where are you going? And Jesus answered him, where am I going? You cannot follow me, but you shall follow me afterward. Peter, you can't come with me now, but there will be a time when you will. Peter said to him, Lord, why can I not follow you now? I want it now. I will lay down my life for your sake. Jesus answered him, will you lay down your life for my sake? Most assuredly, I say to you, Peter, the rooster shall not crow till you have denied me. How many times?
3.
3 times. Mr. Peter, the bold one, the big mouth. Jesus, wow, what are you talking about? I'm going to follow you. Jesus said, those are nice words, Peter, but you're going to deny me 3 times before this rooster crows. Jesus is preparing the disciples for his departure. And I'm sure it must have rocked them terribly, because he was the glue. He was the one, he was the reason that they came together. Jesus then says, coming back up to verse 34. He says, a new commandment I'm going to give you, that you love one another as I have loved you. Now, I want you to hold on to that little phrase. As I have loved you. Jesus essentially says this. He says, I've shown you, I've demonstrated to you what love looks like. How has he done that? What has he done?
Wash the feet.
He's washed their feet, or soon to wash them. The chronology here. Will be or have done. Washing their feet. He's taught them. He's served them. Healing people. All sorts of things. And he was with them. And he loved them. He showed concern. And all these sorts of things. And he rebuked them when they needed to be rebuked. Jesus said, I have shown you what love looks like. I've sacrificed for you. Jesus did not have to come down from heaven, but he did. He did. And he gave so much. And Jesus said, I've shown you what love looks like. Okay? I've given you an example. But now, I'm giving to you a new commandment. A new commandment. What is the commandment? To love one another. I mean, you say, Eric, what do you mean new commandment? Of course we're meant to love one another. Now, wait a minute. Let's go back in the time machine, a couple thousand years. We're in a Jewish setting. The only thing these lot would know about would be the Jewish sacrificial system. Right? So what's required? Well, it's required to bring a certain dove or a certain lamb at this time of the year, and then a little bit later on, a certain sacrifice here and a certain thing there, and now it got all pear-shaped for sure. Okay, but in their minds, it's all about what you do. As long as you do these bits, everything's okay. And Jesus comes along and shocks them in the ears of these Jewish men. They don't understand it, that they said, then when Jesus said, I want you to love one another just like I've shown you love. To love one another. And I can imagine as they heard those words, I'm sure they're scratching their heads trying to figure out what in the world does that mean? What does that mean? And from that time, I'm sure they were trying to suss out, to try and put the bricks together, to connect the dots on what does that mean. And that's the challenge for us. Now, in our little church covenant, and we're going to come to this, and that'll be the last little bit that we'll be looking at today. I've got one more little point that I want to bring out. But for us, as Jesus gave the commandment to them, to love one another, what then does that mean to us? What does that mean to us? I think a couple weeks ago we kind of thought about this in a little bit different way. And we kind of challenged ourselves to say, okay, what does that mean to me to love someone that I really don't know and I don't have any real connection to? What does that mean? Does that mean I need to put aside something of who I am naturally and allow God to come in and do something in my life and in my heart to give me a love for someone that I maybe have a hard time loving naturally? Do you find it easy to love everybody? Or is it kind of tough? I find it tough, to be honest with you. I find it tough. Now, there are certain people that I connect with naturally, maybe because we got the same hobby. Maybe we like the same sort of things. Maybe we like running, or maybe we like gardening, or maybe we like building things, or maybe we like this or that, the other. And so we connect a little bit more, I'm going to use the word organically. We connect a little bit more naturally. But that's easy. The challenge is to love folk that I may not necessarily connect with naturally, or even are a challenge to me. That's where the tough bit is. That's where the tough bit is. Jesus goes on to say, "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you, so that you will also love one another." He said that. But then verse 35, by what? By loving one another, which is very unnatural. By this, all will know that you are my disciples. How? If you have love one for another. Jesus said, you're going to have a new testimony. You're going to have a new testimony. And the testimony is this, that as a part of this new thing called a church, God, because of what He's done in my heart and in my life, God has given me the strength and the desire to love people that I would not normally love or even be bothered about. It is a love that doesn't necessarily ask, what's in it for me? It's a love that gives and serves. And if any of you have been around RCBC, the church here, for even a few years, I think most everyone here is relatively new. I think Chris, who is not here today, has been around, has got the long life badge. But, you know, as people come and people go, there are those folks who are easy to love. There are those folks who are a bit more challenging to love. That's just the way it is. You may say, Eric, it's hard to love you. I can believe that, okay? But the reality is, when we look at this thing, and Jesus says, he commands us to love one another. He says, not just for that purpose, but to be a testimony to the outside world. When they look at a church and they say, how in the world can you do that? How can you function? How can you love each other? How can you accept each other? How can you deal with the fact that, you know, how can you feel the fact that, you know, the way this person does this, or the way Lisa does this, or Jen, I don't understand that. Well, why? Because we love one another. And then it's trying to fit all the different bits and all the different things, how it looks like, and what it looks like in practical terms. So, that is the command, that we love for one another. That we love one another. So what does this mean to our church, Rosamond Community Baptist Church? What does that mean to us? Well, I don't know if you have it on your paper, if you're following on the paper, but this is where, what I'm going to say, it's where the individual and the corporate. Now when I say corporate, I don't mean Chad's business. I don't mean Apple or Microsoft or some business out there. When I say corporate, I mean us together. Okay? You come as an individual into the building, into the room here, but as we meet together, we are a body. We are a unit. Okay? So, this thing of a church is where the individual and the corporate, the group, meet together. Yes, you're individuals. Yes, as an individual you need to grow. Yes, as an individual we need to worship and all those sorts of things. But as a church, we are to love one another. We are to do what is important. I've got 5 things, 5 words, And for any who's been around a few years, Janice may be the only one, Lisa probably, who would be familiar with these words, possibly Chad. Let me just go through these really quick. We'll just touch on them. We have actually spoken particular Sundays on each of these words, and we've taken an entire Sunday on each of these words, but we just want to give them out to you as it is in our church covenant, looking toward our baptismal service at the end of the month. Number one, to encourage you and provide opportunities to grow in the grace and knowledge of Jesus Christ through discipleship is that first word. Okay, discipleship. And this is learning and growing. Now, I realize that for every sort of period within our church in these last 20 years, we have tried to always offer a way for people to hook into a small group, okay? Because a small group is just a different dynamic than a Sunday morning. Okay? It's just the way it is. And I love the small group environment. And I realize that we've had different ways and different times. We've struggled to try and keep things going for a period of time because people come, people go, things change. And if there's something that we can do that's workable and sustainable and doable to be able to give you that opportunity. You may say, Eric, well, I can read something and I can grow on my own. I can look at the internet and watch YouTube and all these kind of things. That's true. That's true. But I think there is something special and unique about coming together. Small little handful of people. Also, let me just mention this while we're here. Chad didn't say it, but I'll say it. I'll say it just from the reality of the situation. Chad is brand new into all this. Okay, Chad has a desire, which is fantastic. The reality is, Chad is different than me. I'm different than Chad. Is that profound? Okay. As Chad comes along and gets his feet wet into this whole preachy thing, he's going to be figuring out how he works and what his style is. And everyone has a different style, isn't that right? I mean, the way Audrey cooks is different than the way Lisa cooks, or different than the way whoever Janice cooks, okay? We all have our different style in the way we do things, and that's okay. Wouldn't it be boring that if everyone spoke like Eric? That'd be awful. So throughout these next 3 months, in September, October, November, we're going to have different speakers that come in that we all different styles and different gifts and different abilities, and about all different sorts of things, and that's okay. We need to celebrate that. We need to celebrate that. And we have to be very careful about sort of judging. And we have to remember, this is not just about us as an individual. This is about our church, our group. This is about us loving one another. So one of the first things is that to encourage you and to provide opportunities to grow through discipleship. Number two, to support you by rejoicing with your victories and weeping with you in sorrow in that of fellowship. And like I said, we could take a whole Sunday, and we have, and we will again, this as we look at these individual words and how important they are. Number three, we want to encourage you to engage with God alongside your church family in corporate, all together, as well as personal worship. Worship is so important. Eric, I can worship on my own. You're right, you can, and you should. But when we come together, it's something incredibly important, special. Now, Lisa, myself, Chad, Bethany, Liana, right? Yes. About 3 weeks ago, we were down at Keswick, which is a lovely town, and they've been doing these sort of big meetings, for, week-long sorts of things. It was fantastic. Was the teaching great? It was okay, yeah, fine. But there was an element to it that was something you can't manufacture. When you gather 1,000 believers in a big tent and you sing together, 1,000 voices, wow. Eric, does that mean when we have a half a dozen or 15 or 20 or 25, as we do sometimes on a Sunday, that means we can't worship? No, of course not. But I'm simply saying, having that environment is nice. So that's why I want to encourage you that your presence here is important. Don't feel like, if I don't come, it doesn't really matter. I'm just one. Well, here's what happens. If someone thinks, well, I'm just one, but someone else just thinks, I'm just one, all of a sudden that becomes how many? 2. Someone else thinks, well, I'm not bothered. It doesn't really matter if I don't come. That's 3. And that adds up. That adds up. And then those who come look around and they're thinking, oh, well, I came to worship. Of course. But there is that element, okay? I'm not trying to pressure. I'm not trying to do any of that sort of stuff. I'm just trying to emphasize that you are important as we gather for worship. Number four. We want to together to fulfill the Lord's command in reaching the world by activity, engaging with non-Christians, with a life-changing gospel in what the word is, evangelism. Evangelism. Sharing the good news of Jesus with other people. That's why we do Message Church. That's why we do outreaches and all those kind of things, to give people an opportunity to understand who Jesus is and how this all works. Last but not least, that of service, serving one another. To meet the needs of you and the community through service, as God gives us strength and gifting so that His name will be made famous. Now, let me also say this. Okay, from the very beginning, my 2 passions for everyone here at RCBC is to, number one, give you an opportunity, if you want to be involved in some way, in some small group, somehow, some way. Okay? And again, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him. That's it. Okay? So we want to make the opportunity. If you don't want to, that's fine. But it's a missed opportunity. So it's an opportunity. Number 2, an opportunity to serve in some way, to have some role to serve. Because here's what I know. That if people aren't plugged in some way, that more often than not, they'll find their way out the back door, discouraged, because you never feel part of things. Okay, that's just a reality. Okay, it's just something I've noticed over the years. So my passion, my desire is to give everybody an opportunity to be involved in whatever gifting, abilities that people have. And I also know, as we come along in our different chapters of life, energy comes and energy goes. Wouldn't it be great if you always had Rosie's energy? Wouldn't that be great? As long as you could bottle up, right? You could bottle up and let it out at certain times. Okay. But the reality is, as time goes on, energy depletes, and we're not able to do everything that we would like to do. And I certainly appreciate that. And Chad and Bethany are in a different chapter in their lives. Young couple, they just got married. And, they're trying to figure out how marriage works and how life works and all that sort of stuff. And so for example, I want you to be aware that Chad is not the pastor while we're gone. So please, we need to respect, their time. And yes, Chad and Bethany are involved and love the church and love the Lord and all that kind of stuff. That's fantastic. But they've got their own things they're trying to figure out. And some of us who've got a few more years under our belt, energy is waning. So we just have to figure out in this whole thing of service what we can do and what we can't do. And it's okay what we can't do. But the challenge is, okay, where do we fit in? And as we mentioned before, where do we fit in this grand picture of what God calls us to do?